You are about to attend the meeting with the ID number 102110. If this is correct, enter the meeting password followed by the pound key. At the tone, please speak your name or location. When finished, press the pound key. We have been unable to record your name. At the tone, please speak your name or location. When finished, press the pound key. We have been unable to record your name. No recording will be saved.
Does anyone on the line not have a copy of the primary prevention capacity assessment tool? Have I not emailed it to you? If you don't have one, speak up and let me know and I can email it to you real quick. But I think I've emailed everyone who said they were going to be on the webinar today.
Amanda?
Yeah.
Did you notice that I sent you an updated one?
Yeah, I sent that out this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Only slightly concerned because I've had a lot more RSVPs than the people who are on, but I'm not getting any emails that folks are having trouble, so I'll just give folks a few more minutes.
At Liberty Center, Every Woman's House.
I went in and recorded it and had to configure this. Enter in the code for the recording. Where is everybody?
This is Leslie from Every Woman's House.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Have you been able to get onto the website okay?
No,
Yes.
I haven't. I'm afraid I didn't look at it ahead of time.
Okay. So you're working on it right now, or do you need me to send you something?
I have the email with the link on it, and I've gotten into the link, and I guess I need to download.
Yeah.
Kind of stuck here on this screen. It's not clear what I'm supposed to do next. See, view and edit Microsoft Office. Great.
Yeah, it might be one of those things where you have to download the software and just hit run and start.
Yeah, it's just not easy. I don't know what this window is on my box. Oh, maybe I can just close that.
If you need more help, I can give you our IT person's number, although I think that was in the email too.
Let me just try it again. You know, I'm not afraid of downloading, but it's just not going through the way you normally see it.
Well, if it doesn't work at all, we could send you the PowerPoint, and you can kind of follow on your own if all else fails. Okay, well, it's 5 after, and I think that we'll go ahead and just get started, and maybe as we do introductions and stuff, the rest of the folks will come on board. So, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
Morning.
And everyone can see the PowerPoint okay and can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I think we'll go ahead and start with introductions. Just to let you know who's online here. Sitting with me is, this is Amanda Suttle, is Deb Seltzer, and Beth Malthus is also on the call from ODH RPE. And our presenter today is Dr. Sandra Ortega. She has been working with us, has it been a year? Maybe? Yeah, a year?
Pretty close.
Getting close to a year on our statewide evaluation project. And this is one of the outcomes of that project. There will be a series of webinars related to program evaluation, and you'll be hearing more from us pretty soon about some other things that we've been working on related to program evaluation. But Dr. Ortega has worked for over 25 years in evaluation and has served as the evaluator on several national initiatives, state-level initiatives, and an internal evaluator for several nonprofit organizations. She has experience working with project managers and funding sponsors to develop evaluation frameworks that include scopes of work, data reporting mechanisms, and deliverable timelines for projects in education, health, and human services. She has a wealth of experience that she's sharing with us, and she has authored several articles on her work and evaluation and presented at lots of conferences. And so she's going to walk us through today this primary prevention assessment tool, and I'll go ahead and throw it out there again. Did anyone not get the tool ahead of time via email to print out and look at today? Okay. If you need it, I can email it to you, so just let me know. But everyone should have gotten that, and it's going to be easier for you for this webinar if you have it printed out in front of you and can walk through it and look at it that way. So, something else to note is that this webinar is being recorded, so so watch what you say. No. And a lot of folks that couldn't make it today can access it later, and I'll send everyone a link to it so you can share it with your colleagues who weren't able to be here today after we get that link all set up. Okay? So probably most of you have been on webinars by now and kind of know how they work. But basically, if you have the ability to mute your phone, that would be great. If not, I don't think that we have that capability to do that from here. So we'll just count on you to not have too much background noise going on, things like that. The way that we're going to work this in terms of questions is Dr. Ortega is going to be facilitating the presentation, and Deb and I will be here at ODH and we'll be monitoring any questions that come through. And I think that Sandra's preference for today is if you can hold your questions until the end, that would be ideal. If you can't, go ahead and change your feedback color. That's the little box next to your name. And if you can see how to do that, if you look in the upper right corner at the top of the bar, there's a feedback, and right now it should be a green box. If you click the little arrow next to the green box, if you can change it to purple right now, just to show me that you know how to do it, okay? I can see most folks are doing it. It's in the upper right corner. It says feedback, and there's a little square with a color in it. If you click the arrow, you should be able to change it to purple, red, blue, yellow, green. If you can change it to purple, that would be great. And then as we go through today, if you have a question, as we're going through, go ahead and change your thing your feedback color to purple if you have a question, and then I will click on your name and send you a private chat, and we can kind of chat, and I can see if your question is something that needs to be answered right away or if Sandra can get it at the end with the others. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead and change your color back to green, please. So everyone is all on the same page, and we can proceed. Thank you. The other thing is Sandra is trying to make this a little bit more interactive, and there will be some polls throughout the webinar, and so we'd like everyone to participate, and you'll see how that works. You'll just be able to click on your answer within the slide.
I'm from Asian American Community Care Business.
Whoa, who's that? I don't know who that was. All right. So you'll see how the poll works as we go through, but basically you just click on your answer and it tabulates automatically, and it's anonymous, so it gets us. It's a good way for us to see kind of where you're at. I think that is it as far as the Netiquette and the web features. The other thing is that this webinar is being recorded and also could be potentially interpreted to some deaf individuals, and so it's a lot easier and more clear if only one person speaks at a time, and we don't interrupt each other, and try and speak clearly when you do speak. So just keep that in mind if you do have questions at the end or if you need to talk on the line at any time. Any questions about any of that? Okay, great. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ortega, and she will get us started. And thanks again, everyone, for being here. I appreciate it.
Good morning. I'm noticing some rustling sound, so if the phone can be muted, that would be great. Okay, it must have been Amanda. No, just kidding, Amanda. Oh, it's back. Okay, so if you could mute your phone, that would be great. Okay, well, good morning and welcome to the first in our series of webinars on primary prevention. I want to thank Deborah, Amanda, and Beth for making this possible. I appreciate taking the time out of your busy day to participate in what we hope is a positive learning experience. The information sharing should take about an hour or so, and then there's a brief evaluation at the end to determine if our learning objectives for the webinar were reached. I need first to provide you with the CDC disclaimer. The views and information provided in this web conference do not necessarily represent the official views of the U.S. government, CDC, or ODH. Always have to have that little disclaimer in there. Okay. So the webinar objectives. We have 3 overall objectives for this webinar. First of all, we hope to introduce you to the Primary Prevention Capacity Assessment Tool and discuss the purpose of the tool, how to use the tool to assess your primary prevention capacity, and how to use the information from the self-assessment to develop an action plan for training and technical assistance. Of course, we have 2 learning objectives for the webinar, and by the end of the webinar, we hope that you will understand the purpose of the primary prevention capacity assessment and be able to complete your self-assessment and create an action plan for training and technical assistance based on your assessment results. Okay, so first we're going to take a little poll before we jump into the purpose and content of the primary prevention assessment. I'd like to ask you to respond to the poll that you should see come up on your screen. So how many of you complete an annual self-assessment of your service capacity to assist in planning for the new year? And I can see 4 have answered, now 5, 6, 7, 8, 'So it looks like a lot of people do an annual assessment, so this is good. I've got 8 people who've responded so far, so I think pretty much everyone has responded. Nobody said, what is a self-assessment? So I guess that wasn't one of your selections. I'm going to close the poll, and then I'm going to show the results. And so as you can see, I hope, if everybody can see, that 87% of those who responded do an annual assessment, and one person, or 12%, that's why statistics are funny, 12% stated that they did not. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about why doing an annual assessment is so important. We all know that the current funding environment makes it especially important to use data for decision making. We are continually asked to do more with less and less. Using tools to facilitate a team meeting focused on your primary prevention and evaluation capacity can assist you in developing an annual plan for training and technical assistance. Through using such a tool, you're more equipped to determine where to direct your resources to build your staff capacity. Well, I'm glad no one answered what is a self-assessment, so I think we're all pretty much on the same page when it comes to understanding assessment tools. Okay, so we're going to turn to the attention now to the Primary Prevention Capacity Assessment tool. As Amanda mentioned earlier, this tool is the outcome of over a year of development. It's based on prevention science best practices in primary prevention. The development team includes the RPE staff, Amanda, Deborah, and Beth. The 3 pilot sites, Sarnco, Sue Wismar, PAVE, Jan Green River, and Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, Sandra Miller. I want to thank the pilot sites, as we're calling them, for their efforts in helping us fine-tune and develop this tool that we're to hopefully use as a model for Ohio's RPE sites. The tool is available in Microsoft Word, which most of you should have received prior to the webinar, and will also be available shortly, we hope, in SurveyMonkey. As I mentioned earlier, it's based on the work of the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Action Alliance, my work in my dissertation, and the work of Wanderseman, Nations, Christo on primary prevention and outcome measurement capacity building. And so basically what we're going to do now is we are going to look a little bit into what the purpose of the assessment tool is. The purpose of the primary prevention capacity assessment is to gauge where folks are regarding their capacity to provide and evaluate primary prevention services. We know already that folks are at different places in their prevention practice. This tool will help us and you, we hope, develop training opportunities for identified needs to build strength in those areas. We also would like to use the tool reflectively to monitor growth and change in your primary prevention capacity over the years. So what we would like to do is an annual assessment starting this year in the first quarter of the upcoming funding cycle to get what we would call a baseline, and then reassess annually to monitor growth and determine plans for ongoing staff training and technical assistance. So let's move on to the actual content of the assessment. Now would be a good time to have the tool in hand so we can review the content together. There are 3 sections that include self-assessment and scoring, and then a 4th section for you to reflect on barriers and challenges, successes and lessons learned related to your prevention strategies and activities that you've assessed. The 3 scored sections are program characteristics, matching your program and participants, and implementation and evaluation practices. The final section is to record the barriers, challenges, successes learned, and then create an action plan for your training and technical assistance priorities. Scoring. For those of you that have the assessment in hand, you can see that the scores run from 1 to 5 from the left side of the document to the right. A score of 1 indicates the activity or strategy minimally includes the primary prevention characteristics, and a score of 5 highly corresponds or aligns with the primary prevention characteristics of evidence-based or effective primary prevention programs. Each of the sections has a place to mark a score, and on the first page of the assessment, in the top right header, there is a place to mark the overall score. There are a total of 80 points. To get that total, you would sum each of the sections to derive the overall score. As you move from left, low, to right, high, read each description and choose the one that most closely aligns with your activities or strategies. In reflecting on your activities and strategies for scoring, think about them broadly. That is, many of you have activities or strategies at various levels of the spectrum of prevention or social ecology, for those of you who are using that model. So think in terms of those strategies as a whole in affecting the desired change in participants. And when I say participants, I'm also saying using that term broadly. It could be your participants, your schools, your communities. So it can go from the individual level all the way up to the policy level, depending on which framework you're using. Remember, there are no right or wrong answers. The focus is on improvement and to develop a training and technical assistance that will guide that improvement. We've had some feedback or questions on how long will the self-assessment take, and based on the feedback from the pilot sites, I believe the assessment process will take about an hour to an hour and a half to complete with your team. We're strongly encouraging you to use a team approach when you do your assessment, because that way you'll be working with those people that are not only the administrators of the project, but also those people in the field that are implementing the different activities and strategies. So now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the assessment factors and the definitions and scoring. The first section is program characteristics, and the first factor is comprehensive. Primary prevention best practices include multiple components and affect multiple settings to address a wide range of risk and protective factors of the issues being addressed. In our case, this means offering activities and strategies at various levels of the spectrum of prevention in multiple settings to reinforce healthy relationships and the risk and protective factors related to building and supporting healthy relationships. So let's look across this factor at the characteristics, at the comprehensive characteristic scored from low, 1 to high. So if you look at the tools that you should have in front of you, not comprehensive on the left side is if you were going to score to 1, it would be strategies, activities are offered only at the individual level of the spectrum of prevention and are limited to presentation-style education settings or information fairs. If you were going to score to 2, it would be the strategies, activities are not linked or do not support each other. The activities address only 2 levels of the spectrum of prevention effectively, and or the strategies, activities are not offered in multiple settings. If you were going to score a moderate or mixed, moderately comprehensive, the strategies, activities work at 3 levels of the spectrum of prevention effectively or cover more than 2 levels but in an incomplete manner, such as in limited settings or content addresses common set of risk protective factors and prevention messages between participant groups are somewhat connected. So you really want to be thinking about linking those messages so your messages are aligned at the different levels of the spectrum of prevention. Moving over to comprehensive or high characteristic of primary prevention, a 4 would be strategies, activities work at 3 or more levels of the spectrum of prevention effectively, are offered in multiple settings, and each of the components is designed to complement each other to reinforce primary prevention messages. And then a score of a 5 would be strategies, activities work at 3 or more levels of the spectrum of prevention effectively, are offered in multiple settings, and include policy-level efforts that reinforce primary prevention messages. Now, I know that you're probably going, okay, so where do I write that score? Well, based on my experience with the pilot sites, what they do is they just have been writing that score right in the box that aligns with whatever you feel your activities and strategies description is. So, for example, if you think it's a 5, you just write a 5 underneath that description. And then you can use that to score your section score later. Okay, the next factor associated with best practices is varied teaching and learning methods. As you see, that's number 2 on your slide. The evidence base for prevention recommends that strategies should include multiple teaching methods, including some type of active, skills-based component. Effective programs provide hands-on experiences, such as role plays, verbal and written practice, and opportunities for practicing new behaviors. Effective practices also use varied teaching to adapt to the varied learning styles of the participants. So let's look across the scale for this factor. So if you go to the left side of the continuum, singular teaching and learning methods. So a 1 would be strategies, activities use singular teaching and learning methods such as assembly-style lectures or presentations focused on knowledge change and do not provide opportunities for participants to acquire or practice new skills. A 2 would be the strategies, activities incorporate varied format, but only minimal opportunity for skill development. Most of the activity strategy focus is on knowledge or awareness change. A moderate, or a 3, would be strategies, activities use varied formats and include some opportunity for group participation and acquiring new skills, including time for processing potential skills, but are heavily dependent on a lecture format. A 4 would be varied teaching and learning methods, so we're moving on into the higher level of primary prevention. A varied teaching, an activity or strategy uses teacher-learner models, emphasis on active, interactive approaches, practicing skills, modeling, group participation is highly valued and frequent, allows time for processing and role-playing. And then a 5 would be the strategies, activities emphasize skill development and incorporate peer modeling and or club formats to extend learning and skill development. The next factor that supports best practices in primary prevention is the promotion of protective factors. Prevention strategies that promote protective factors promote the development of healthy sexuality, they promote the development of healthy relationships, and seek to foster socially just communities and institutions. Evidence-based activities and strategies promote the connections between people that enhance well-being and positive self-concept, in addition to increasing personal safety and a range of outcomes such as behavioral outcomes as gender equity, social equality, and economic justice. So let's take a closer look at the scale for protective factor promotion. And that'll be on page 2 for those of you who are following along, and I hope all of you are following along. So if we look to the left, we'll see 1 would be the strategies, activities focused primarily on avoidance behaviors and are not informed by a social justice perspective. A 2 is the strategies, activities do not promote protective factors that support the development of healthy relationships, but focus on the risk factors for perpetration without linking risk to social justice or oppression. A 3, which is partially addresses protective factors. The strategies, activities partially address protective factors that support healthy relationships, sexuality, or positive social outcomes, but generally focus on risk factors for negative behavior. And moving up the continuum to a 4, which is strategies, activities promote and sustain development of healthy sexuality, healthy relationship among peers, role models, and adults, but do not integrate information skills for developing social justice. And a 5 is all that, plus they integrate information in skill development to promote social justice. So basically, looking at those protective factors, we move from a 1 to a 5 in your scoring. The fourth program characteristic to support evidence-based practices is sufficient dosage. And we often have sorry, I got a chat message that popped up on my screen. We often have conversations around what is the appropriate dosage. We know that folks are pressed for time when they're working with different populations, so that is often a conversation that comes up. The evidence states that participants need to be exposed to sufficient dosage for the activity strategy to have an effect. Dosage is measured by the number of contact hours, including the number of sessions and the length of the sessions. Dosage also includes booster or follow-up sessions to help sustain the effects of the original exposure to the activity or strategy. The amount of dosage depends on the behaviors being addressed and the extent of behavioral change required to achieve the desired outcome. So let's take a look at the description of low to high for dosage. Okay, if we look at what we would consider a 1, based on the scale we've developed, a 1 is single opportunity for exposing the same participants to prevention messages. Example includes an assembly presentation, a one-time short duration workshop, community proclamation events without participant follow-up. A 2 would be a 2 to 3 offerings for the same participants, but does not follow the evidence base and does not include follow-up with participants to determine skill acquisition and use of those skills. A mixed dosage would provide strategies and activities, provide several opportunities for message skill exposure with the same participant groups, but the frequency duration has been shortened. Minimal follow-up is provided to reinforce messages, skills learned at the initial activities. And moving up the scale to a 4 and 5, a 4 would be the strategies activities provide several opportunities for message skill exposure with the same participant groups within a concentrated time frame as the evidence-based practices, but do not include follow-up activities to reinforce messages and new skill development. So those of you that are using a standard curriculum such as Safe Dates or Expect Respect, what you may be doing is changing the number of hours and the duration of the sessions to match the time limitations for your participants. So that would probably go into a 4. And a 5 would be strategies, activities provide several opportunities for message skill exposure with same participant groups within a concentrated time frame as the evidence-based practices and provide opportunities for participant follow-up activities that are specifically for reinforcing messages and new skills. It also gives the participants the opportunity to practice those new skills prior to the follow-up or the booster session. Okay, the next factor, which is factor 5 on your program characteristics, is theory-driven. Theory-based or driven activities and strategies are when you are able to describe the underlying theory of your project and activities. How many of you are able to describe the underlying theory of your projects and activities? And you don't have to, we're not doing a poll right now, but just think about it. And does your entire team also, or is your entire team also able to link the program activities with your theory of change? The theory base is that if we do this, then X should occur based on some logical rationale of the risk protective factors related to the reduction of initial perpetration of violence. So let's look at the scaling from low to high of the theory-driven factor. So on the low-end scale, which would be a 1, there's no theory or purposeful logical rationale which underlies the strategies and activities. A 2 would be the strategies, activities are based on causal foundation that is not well established and are not informed by a strategic plan with clear, achievable goals, activities, and outcomes. A mixed theory base is some program component activities appear to be based on, I'm getting some fuzziness in the audio. Some program components activities appear to be based on a sound causal foundation and or the program is informed by a strategic plan, but it's difficult to determine how the component activities are connected to the overarching theory of change.
I'm hearing a beeping, like someone's phone is maybe ringing on the second line or something like that.
Yeah, I'm getting that too.
If y'all can check your phones real quick just to be sure.
Thanks, Amanda.
Yep.
Okay. 4 is the strategies activities are based on purposeful, logical rationale of risk protective factors, change theory, or process theory of prevention of initial perpetration, and the evidence base for primary prevention of violence. The program components are clearly linked through the theory of change to which the program prescribes. And the 5 is strategies activities are based on purposeful, logical rationale of risk protective factors, change theory, or process theory of prevention of initial perpetration. All components are based on a sound, common, causal foundation and are informed by a well-articulated theory of change. It's important to note that a logic model, yes, here we go with logic models, a logic model is a theory of action. So effective prevention strategies use reverse engineering to prevent behavior problems and promote positive behavior. So if we're looking at a logic model, basically what we do is we say this is the outcome that we would like to achieve. And then we walk backwards and start describing, okay, so what activities do we need to do in order to achieve those outcomes? And so for those activities, what resources do we need to achieve those outcomes? And what would be the output? So you see that is a theory of change. So kind of a bonus with your logic model. You can mark yourself, if you have a good logic model, you can mark yourself pretty high on this one. So now let's move on to aligning the activities and strategies with the agency mission. Okay, so we're going to look at aligning your activities and strategies with your agency mission. A question to ask is, does the program, or in our case, the activities and strategies, demonstrate a commitment to prevention as reflected in the agency's strategic plan, mission, agency policies, and practices? This is generally a question of fit. So let's look at the scaling of this factor from low to high. Sexual violence, intimate partner violence, primary prevention is outside the scope of the agency and does not seem to be a good fit for the agency based on organizational history, mission, and service provision. So that would be a 1 at the low end of the scale. 2 is primary prevention is a fit with the agency organizational mission, but is not included in the agency mission because the agency is mostly focused on other types of service provision. Moderate integration, which is a 3, would be some primary prevention concepts are reflected in the agency's mission, strategic plan, and practices, but is not funded in proportion to other services provided and is not considered during strategic planning. A 4 would be the agency demonstrates a commitment to primary prevention of sexual violence and intimate partner violence, but primary prevention is not part of the organization's strategic plan, and resources are not allocated proportionately to prevention and other services. And then a 5 is the agency demonstrates a commitment to SV and IPV primary prevention. Prevention is part of the agency's strategic plan, and resources are allocated to prevention in proportion to other services. So that is integration into agency mission. So I'm going to do a check-in right now because we're almost to the end of the program characteristics, and I just want to make sure that everybody is following and that you are comfortable with the information. And if you have questions, you can send to Amanda. So if you're doing okay, change your box to purple. Yeah, I'm getting some purples. Yay! I love technology. It's working. Okay. All right. So it looks like everybody's following along. And if you're having any difficulty or need to ask a question, go ahead and ask, Amanda. And okay, let's turn our boxes back to green so we can move on through the assessment tool. Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so moving on to the seventh characteristics under the program characteristics factors. Best practices in prevention are based on positive relationships. Activities should foster and model positive relationships between the participants and offer opportunities to problem solve with peers. Effective programs support the development of positive and assertive communication to increase clear boundaries in relationships and convey respect, support, and empathy. So let's take a look at the scale from low to high. On the low end, you would score a 1 if your strategy activity focuses only on avoidance behaviors in informational presentations, such as risk reduction or safety awareness building to prevent violence. You would score a 2 if your strategy activity focused primarily on avoidance behavior in relationships and do not offer opportunities for positive relationships to be modeled or practiced. You would score a 3 if your strategy activity provides information and skill building in positive relationships, but may be facilitated by only one presenter without opportunity to model positive relationship building. On the higher end of the scale, a 4 would be strategy activity provides exposure to adults and peers that support building healthy relationships through role play and problem solving with peers. At least one session is taught by co-presenters who model positive, healthy relationships. And a 5 would be strategy activity provides exposure to adults and peers in a way that promotes strong relationships and supports positive outcomes. Multiple sessions are co-taught by diverse presenters who model healthy relationships. So the total possible points for this section is 35. So what you would do is you would total your points and put the score in the section heading. Okay, moving on to the second section. Oh, time to switch my slide. Okay. Effective prevention programs match the program with the participants. Some of you may be asking, why are the next 2 characteristics in their own section? Do they merit their own section? Well, yes, they do, because you could be doing all the above very well, but if your activities and strategies are not appropriately timed and socioculturally relevant, your outcomes will more than likely not be achieved. So let's take a closer look at the 2 characteristics of effective prevention programs and why they are so important. Program activities should happen at a time developmentally that can have maximum impact in the participant's life. The focus is on building resiliency and reducing risk before behaviors occur. They are tailored to the intellectual, cognitive, and social development level of the participant. Programs should be tailored to fit within the cultural beliefs and practices of the specific group, as well as the local community norms. This means content and approach is developed through direct involvement of the community members and stakeholders. So if we are developing activities, primary prevention activities and strategies for teens and preteens, shouldn't their input be included? So a lot of what we do is we focus on activities for teens, preteens, and college students. And I don't want to get off the topic too much, but I'd like to mention the work of Lori Castell from the New York Delta Project, who discusses the impact of adultism, yes, that's adultism, on projects addressing teen relationship violence. I'd recommend her work to help reflect and inform our activities and strategies for teens and college-age participants. And you can look her up through the Delta listserv, or I can get you her information if you're interested. So let's take a look at this factor and the scaling from low to high. So if we look at matching program with participants, and we're looking at the timing for primary prevention, one would be the strategy activity materials use a one-size-fits-all approach. They are intervention-oriented and are not developmentally relevant for the participant. A 2 would be the strategy activities materials are intervention-focused and are not appropriate time for the participant age or social, emotional, developmental stage. A 3 would be the strategies activities work with more than one age group, including focusing on risk and protective factors relevant to early adolescence or younger. Program content and format has been somewhat modified to fit the selected group that participates in the program, but is not totally adapted for the participants. Most of the activities or strategies focus on risk protective factors and begin in middle school or younger and are developmentally relevant for the majority of the participants. So that would be a 4. And then highly appropriately timed, a 5 would be all the strategies activities are developmentally relevant. They begin prior to the emergence of unhealthy behaviors, and curriculum materials match the participant cognitive and social development. And then looking at the next factor, low sociocultural relevancy, a 1 would be the strategy activity does not consider sociocultural relevance to participants and was developed without input from community stakeholders. The content and format is narrow and operates from one set of beliefs, practices, or norms. A 2 would be the strategy activity was developed without involvement of diverse community stakeholders, but literature was consulted to assist in the development of the activity strategy. The content and format align with the literature base. And I know oftentimes that happens. We get so caught up in our literature that we forget to go to the people who we want to match, who we want to bring into our services. At least I do. I should speak for myself. So moderate sociocultural relevancy, which would be a 3, is the program selection development involved diverse stakeholders, but their input was not thoroughly integrated and the content format only somewhat reflected the contributions and interests of various cultural social groups. Moving up the scale or the continuum to a 4 on high sociocultural relevancy, a 4 would be most activity strategies reflect the diversity of the participants and are developed using community input. A 5 would be all strategies activities are developed in collaboration with diverse community members, are inclusive of diverse cultural beliefs, practices, and community norms. Okay. I'm going to move this along a little more quickly because we're getting close to our time, and I want to make sure that there's time for questions and answers. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn to my favorite topic, which is the implementation and evaluation. There are 7 factors in this section, and the first one is logic models. And many of you may recognize these factors from the Getting to Outcomes framework. And we have also added a couple others that we feel are really important, such as the well-trained staff that I think we need to focus on. As I mentioned in the first section of the assessment, the inclusion of a theory base for your activities and strategies aligns with best practices. A logic model is a detailed description of your program's theory. In this section, we focus on the content of your logic model and how it is used. So let's take a closer look at the scaling from low to high on the logic model development and use. So in this section, we're just going to look at what would be a low and what would be a high. So a 1 for logic model development and use is no logic model was developed or used to guide program activities and focus staff on program goals, objectives, and outcomes. And then you can read what a 2, 3, and 4 is. And then a 5 is the program logic model clearly includes goals, resources, and outputs that are linked to realistic outcomes based on the programmatic theory of change and adheres to the SMART or ABCDE framework. And if you haven't heard of those yet, you'll be hearing about those in an upcoming webinar. The logic model is used to monitor implementation and the achievement of program outputs and outcomes. So basically, not only do you have to develop a logic model, but you also have to use it and look at it more than once a year. The next factor in this section is the use of a needs and resource assessment, which we often refer to as the NARA, the N-A-R-A. The Needs and Resources Assessment is a systematic review of the needs and resources of your organization, school, community, or state to determine where the gaps are that your strategies and activities will address. So let's take a look at this factor from low to high alignment with best practices. So if you're low, which would be a 1, what we would score as a 1, there was no formal needs and resource assessment conducted. And if you were to score yourself a 5, a formal needs and resource assessment was conducted, and the activities and strategies are based on observed gaps in primary prevention of sexual violence and intimate partner violence, and aligned with other community organization efforts to reduce duplication and increase reinforcement of messages. So one of our programs that was giving me some feedback was telling me that not only do they do a needs and resources assessment, but they have I think it was either a quarterly or a bi-monthly meeting with other folks that are doing similar work to make sure that their messages are aligned. So that would be a really high alignment with your needs and resources assessment, because basically what you're doing is you're leveraging those resources within the community to align your messages. And most people would complete a needs and resource assessment biannually or prior to the implementation of a program service. They're used to inform a strategic plan and reduce duplication of efforts by maximizing or leveraging resources. Okay, so let's go on to the next factor, which moves us into the realm of evaluation. Process monitoring and use. Process monitoring and use asks the question, how will the quality of the implementation be assessed? The focus is on program fidelity to best practices and mechanisms to assess it. So let's take a look how the scoring is aligned with this factor. So if you look at the low-level end for process monitoring and use, a 1 would be there's no implementation monitoring in place to determine participant satisfaction or ensure program fidelity. And at the high end, there's implementation which is monitored regularly for fidelity, including dosage, timing, and implementation quality measures are in place and are used by staff to inform program improvement. So basically this would be you look at your process, you look at your fidelity of your implementation, and then you have conversations with your team to determine how closely what you're doing, what you're implementing, aligns with those best practices. Okay, moving on to outcome evaluation plan. This item assesses to what extent a mechanism is in place to generate outcome data to determine how well your activities or strategies worked to achieve the changes you expected in your theory of change. So we're trying to look at what those outcomes are. Oftentimes what I tell people is if you have a logic model and you really have thoughtful outcomes with measurement criteria within those outcomes, then you have an outcome evaluation plan. So let's think about that. It's not like you have to do a whole separate outcome evaluation plan. If you're using your logic model and developing it with your measurements included in the logic model, then you can use that for your outcome evaluation plan. So on the low end of the scale, a 1 would be no outcome evaluation plan is in place to monitor outcome achievement as stated in the logic model, or no outcomes were included in the logic model. And at a score of a 5 would be the mechanisms are in place to generate outcome data, including pre-post tests, data analysis, and an infrastructure to support continuous quality improvement using outcome data results. If you have an evaluation plan which includes process and outcomes, then the next logical factor is looking or assessing your evaluation use. This is sometimes referred to as continuous quality improvement, or you may hear it CQI. Using your evaluation, both process and outcome, to fine-tune, expand, change your activities and strategies is what encapsulates continuous quality improvement. On the low end of the scale, we have what I call ceremonial use of evaluation results. That is, they are used to report to the funder, and that is basically it. On the high end of the scale, we have what I would call the use of evaluation results for organizational learning, or what other people might call for making data-driven decisions. So if you look at the low end of the scale, a 1 would be evaluation data results are only used to report to the funder upon funder request. There's no internal mechanism for sharing evaluation results, and that mechanism is not integrated into organizational policies and practices. And at the high evaluation use, the evaluation is integrated into program structures and process. The use is systematic for informing decisions on program change, strategic planning, sustainability, resource allocation, and sharing with stakeholders, and also for grant writing. So if you have good evaluation data, you can use it for a lot of different things. An important note here is to include feedback and discussion about your evaluation results so learning and adapting the activities and strategies can occur. Now we'll move on to sustainability. The basic question here is, if the activity strategy is successful, how will it be sustained? If the strategies are integrated into the agency mission, they have a higher likelihood of being sustained if there are sufficient resources to support the efforts. So let's look at the scale for this factor. On the low end of the scale, what you would rate as a 1 would be resources beyond the current funding cycle have not been allocated or secured for the program. The program strategies are an add-on to an intervention staff unit's responsibilities and tasks. And at the high end, or 5, would be the systems for sustainability are in place for garnering further funding after the current funding cycle. Primary prevention activities strategies are supported by multiple funders, and program components are integrated into the organizational mission and systems. Is everyone still with me? If you're still with me, change the purple. I know this is a test, isn't it? Okay, it looks like folks are still with me. And again, if you have any questions, you can send them privately to Amanda and change back to green. That way Amanda won't think she's getting lots and lots of questions at the same time. Okay, the final factor you'll be assessing is staff training. The principles of effective prevention programs recommend that programs need to be implemented by staff members who are sensitive, competent, and have received sufficient training, support, and supervision. Follow-up training and technical assistance to staff are critical. In many of the programs I've evaluated, the staff were the most critical factor for program success. I worked with 46 programs in the state of Florida, and we might have programs, 2 very similar models being instituted in 2 different places, and time and time again, I would go back to the staff because the staff were the most critical component oftentimes of the program's success. So let's take a look at this factor from low to high. Okay, on the low end of the staff training scale is staff training is intermittent and they are not well versed in primary prevention methods or the spectrum of prevention, but do have an understanding of social justice. There's no built-in mechanism to engage in ongoing training and technical assistance to increase their skill set. And at the high end, what you would rate as a 5, staff has a firm foundation in primary prevention, spectrum of prevention, and social justice theory and practice. And agency policy requires that they engage in a specific number of ongoing training and technical assistance to maintain and or increase their skills. Okay. So this section is also worth, has a possible score of 35 points. So what you do is you tally up that, the number of points in that section, and then you put it in the section header. Okay, so now we're going to get into how to use the assessment tool. So basically, what we recommend is you assess once a year. You have a meeting with your team members to discuss the activities and strategies of your primary prevention services. And your team members include the staff, volunteers, supervisors, basically the direct implementers of the services. You want to review each of the factors and select the description that most likely fits your activities and strategies. And hopefully by walking through it today, some of you will be able to say, oh, okay, this looks about where we are, or, you know, I see myself or our program's more here. So hopefully that's been helpful to you to walk through some of it. You want to select the score and tally the score for each subsection, and then sum the subsection score to determine your overall score. I want to make sure that you realize that this is the assessment is one that we need to really do a self-assessment. There's no right or wrong answer. We want to make sure that you realize that it's not competitive. We're not going to be saying, oh, we have such and such a program over here and they're scoring really high, or such and such a program over here and they're scoring really low. It won't be used in that way. Basically, what we want to use it for is to develop effective training and technical assistance. So once you get through with scoring your sections, what you do is you move to the open-ended sections. And as you can see on page 8, I hope it says page 8 on yours, there's a section for barriers, challenges to primary prevention capacity building, successes and lessons learned about your primary prevention capacity building, and then an action plan for building primary prevention and evaluation capacity. You want to include your top 3 priorities for building your primary prevention and evaluation capacity for the upcoming year. And then you want to talk about these things, and hopefully by going through the characteristics in the assessment, some of the conversation will be around, okay, so what were some of the barriers and challenges to this, and what were some of the successes and lessons learned that have emerged the past year that we can use to help guide us into the future. You want to use the information to create an action plan for your training and technical assistance, and then you want to enter the information into SurveyMonkey. And what we've done, for those of you who are not aware of this, is we have created what we're calling a shared SurveyMonkey site. And what we do is we have been going into the SurveyMonkey site with the pilot projects and developing different tools that we're then going to roll out for the larger RPE community. So we're encouraging the RPE sites to complete the assessment in the first quarter of the funding cycle, which for us is between November and January. So to enter the information into SurveyMonkey, what is it that we do? Okay, well, what we want to do is log into the Primary Prevention Capacity Assessment through the link that will be sent to you by ODH. And hopefully that link will be sent to you within the next month. The Primary Prevention Capacity Assessment in the SurveyMonkey Shared Monkey, as we're calling it, is still under construction, but I'm hoping that it'll be up and going by the second week of November. So you just enter your program name and the team members completing the self-assessment into the first two sections of SurveyMonkey, and then the rest will look very similar content-wise to the Word document. So basically what you want to do then is you just want to transfer your scores and the other information from Word to SurveyMonkey. And just a little advice on SurveyMonkey is you can copy and paste the open-ended section comments right from your Word document into SurveyMonkey. So all you have to do is right-click, do a copy, and then go right into the SurveyMonkey tool and right-click and do a paste, and you should be fine. Once you've finished entering your information into SurveyMonkey, all you have to do is then email your ODH program consultant to let her know that you've completed the assessment. Okay, I know this has been a lot of information, and we're looking at time now. We're at 11:06, and this is supposed to conclude at 11:30. So now it's your time to open up and ask questions if you have any. You can provide some feedback on the tool. We're open to your comments and feedback. Amanda?
Hello.
Hello?
You said my name, and I'm sorry, I missed what you said right before that.
I was just saying we could open it up to any questions that folks may have or feedback about the assessment tool.
Yes, definitely. If you have any questions, go ahead and unmute your phone and just let us know. Deb and I were just talking and wanted to reiterate what Sandra said earlier about the use of this tool and what we'll be using it for. It's not, although there's scoring components to it and there's a total score, I think the fear is that when you get a score, I'm sorry, I'm hearing myself on Beth's phone and it's really freaking me out. When you have a score, that means that someone has a better score or a higher score or a lower score, and it's really not like that. It's really going to be to your benefit to use it honestly and to complete it, like Sandra said, as a team, and really, really look at your program and where you're at. And Deb was just saying that it might be where you're really strong in some of the areas, and in order to get stronger in other areas, you might need to almost decrease in your stronger areas. So it's, it kind of ebbs and flows, but it's going to be good to go to baseline this year as we move forward. Sandra put a lot of work and research into this tool. It's really, I think we're really setting the standard as far as assessment and evaluation goes nationally from what Deb has spoken to the CDC about. So I know it's not the most exciting thing in the world for folks to think about, but it's a really, really comprehensive tool, and if you can just take the time to sit down and complete it when you can, maybe sometime over, the holiday season when it gets a little less work busy, more personal busy, then, it'll really be to your benefit. And we just wanted to, say we're not using it in any way for like good or bad or anything like that. So more informative. Does anybody have any questions? Leslie, did you have a question? Your box is purple. No? Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Deb? Does anyone have any thoughts or comments about using it or how they would use it, or maybe any of the pilot sites who have sort of tinkered with it already? Does anyone have any input or any initial thoughts based on just walking through it briefly today? Okay.
Well, if you have any questions and you'd like to provide feedback offline, or off record, I should say, you can contact one of us, and I've got our contact information will be coming up. But in the meantime, it's time for you to provide us with some feedback on whether we've reached our learning goals today. So if you want to go ahead and let us know if you feel like you understand the purpose of the primary prevention assessment tool by clicking on true or false. It's looking like people are still online and filling up the true or false buttons. So we've got 6 folks who have responded. 7 now. All right. So it looks like people are feeling pretty confident that they can use it. And as I was going through it today, I noticed a couple typos, so we will clean those up. And if you see anything that looks out of sorts, be sure to let us know. Okay, so here's the results. It looks like, and can you all see the results now? It looks like everybody who's responded feels like they understand the purpose of the tool. And then we're going to move on to the second question on our objective. How confident are you that you can use the primary prevention assessment tool to determine your primary prevention capacity and develop an action plan for training and technical assistance? Right, the answers are coming in. It'll probably take a little bit of time too to, look at the tool and get familiar with it before you feel confident. But so far we've had 8 people respond. Okay. I'll go ahead and show you the results. And as you can see, most people are feeling somewhat confident, and we have 3 that feel very confident. I hope those are our pilot sites, not to put you on the spot, pilot sites. You have more familiarity with the tool. Okay, and here's our contact information. And then the last slide that I want to show you is, well, first of all, I want to thank you for participating. I want to thank Amanda, Deborah, and Beth for working so hard on this. I also want to thank the pilot sites, Sue, Jan, and Sandra, for providing us with great feedback from the field and moving us forward with this process.
Yes, thank you, everyone. This is Amanda again, and I just wanted to say that you'll be getting an email from us with a link to this webinar that's been recorded so that you can share it with other folks, and some more information about, submitting this tool when the SurveyMonkey link becomes active, and when you need to do that, and any other follow-up information that we'll have about future webinars, too. Sorry, Sandra.
Oh, no, you're absolutely fine. And then just to provide you with some resources for those of you who would be interested, there's a link for the Virginia guidelines. If you go onto this link, you should be able to get it for free. I looked on the original link, and it was like $35 to print it, and that's not something we want folks paying for. And then the Nations and Cousteau article, it can be found in the American Psychologist, but you'd have to pay for it. So what I did was I put a link to a free download, and it's a mentoring program. It's used for the example. And then, of course, if you want a copy of my dissertation, I'd be more than happy to send it to you, but it's like 220 pages, so I'm not sure anybody would want to read it. But I'll be happy to send you the pieces and parts that went into this presentation. And basically, I just want to say thanks very much for participating today. I hope you found it helpful. And I want to encourage you to participate in the upcoming webinar, which will be in December. And I believe the topic will be the item bank that we've created to help you link learning objectives, goal statements, and outcomes of your project. So thank you very much. And this concludes our webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, too.
Bye-bye.